Chiropractors, are you an innovator or a follower? Hi, everybody. Welcome to the KC CHIROpulse Podcast brought to you by CATS Consultants and Chiro Health USA. I'm Dr. Michael Perusich, and I'm joined by my co-host. What are you?
My
My
co-host.
co-host, your
Yeah.
co-host, Dr. Troy Fox. Hey, Troy. We were talking about the old herd mentality in the profession, which it's a pretty big herd.
It is, and it happens a lot, and we see it a lot, and we have people come to us wondering sometimes why they're not doing a little better in practice, and this is just one aspect of it. But in a lot of cases, your buddy down the street is doing X, Y, and Z, and you try to mimic that thinking that's gonna boost your practice rather than becoming or rather than creating your own niche in practice. And I think that there's so much opportunity to create niche in practice now that and when I say a niche in practice, let me tell you what my niche is. Old school adjusting. Now, I know that may sound silly, but there's so many people that are doing functional medicine, or that's just one example, but they decide to really focus on that and they're not seeing that many patients for adjustments.
Yep.
I'm obviously I'm older, but I I use what my strength is, and that's the fact that I've been adjusting for 30 years. And so my strength lies in adjusting technique. And so I feel like that's a strong suit for me.
Sure.
And that will create patient retention. And I look at those things as so sometimes a niche is not the newest, coolest, latest thing. It just may be different and it may be what your forte is in practice.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I've always said this, if you're a follower, you're never a winner. And so you've got to get out from behind the pack and quit trying to do what everybody else is trying to do. Some of you can be successful at certain things and some of you can't. It's just the nature of the beast. And because chiropractic is such a high personality based business, you got to let your personality lead your practice a little bit. So, if you're a great adjuster, excellent. Be confident in your adjusting skills and go out and through your personality, promote that. But you may be a former athlete. And so chiropractic sports medicine may be a better route for you. But anytime we fall into that trap of trying to follow the herd, to me, at least, this is the biggest problem with that. You also start taking on other people's bad habits. And just because your buddy down the street's doing great in practice, it doesn't mean it's right. And I'm not suggesting that just because you're doing well, you're breaking the rules or anything, but there's almost a spell that can be cast upon you if you try to do what your buddies are doing down the street. And we've all heard this saying, but seek out good mentorship because there's no need to make the same mistakes other people have made. And if you're just talking to your buddies in the profession, are you making the same mistakes that other people have made that can actually hurt your business?
And unfortunately, we see that where somebody says, "This is what I'm doing." And we're like, "Where in the world did you get that from?"
Yeah.
And, "Oh, I've got another friend down the street that's doing that. And he says that, this is how Medicare works, or this is how, this is how billing to insurance works or whatever." And it's like, yeah, not so much. And that's not all we see, but that is a little bit of it. And that's concerning when we see that because some people are hesitant to make change because they live in an area where everybody does that. And if everybody's doing it, doesn't always make that herd mentality great. And sometimes it's hard to break away. I have dealt with a little bit of that over my career where somebody says, "I went to another chiropractor that billed for this and I didn't have to pay for it." And I'm
Right.
like, yeah, that doesn't work that way. And so I'm very quick to protect not only myself, but my practice and my staff that work for me. So part of breaking that herd mentality is making sure that what you're doing is something that you can go home at the end of the day and be happy with.
And feel good about. Yeah,
Yeah,
ethically.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And unfortunately, we see far too many docs get in trouble. That's the flip side of what we do is we hear a lot of the good stories, but we hear the bad stories too. And there's recently been a couple of doctors who are in the country who are facing jail time because of things they were doing wrong just because they didn't feel like they were making enough money. And so somebody along the way probably told them, "Hey, do this in your practice." and yeah, made them some money, but it wasn't compliant. It was illegal.
Yeah. And
So
if
you
you don't
gotta be careful.
if you don't want to end up like P. Diddy, because here's the deal, and I say that jokingly, but at the same time, insurance companies now are, and those folks that are in trouble and facing jail time right now, they have utilized the RICO Act against them.
Yep.
So they're using what they use with organized crime against individual doctors. And so you have to be really careful about what you're doing and make sure that you are following all the rules and not just saying everybody else is doing it, so it must be okay.
Yeah.
Kind of like speeding on the highway. I could be driving over the speed limit, which I mean, maybe occasionally I do.
No.
My wife would say most of the time, but I also am aware of the risk.
Yeah.
I know that I could be in a herd of cars or a pack of cars driving down the road, and I could be the one to get pulled over. Maybe the officer getting ready to pull me over sees me accelerating faster than someone else, or maybe he just doesn't like the color of my car.
Or maybe
Or
you're the one in the back of the pack and you're the easiest one to get to.
and that
That's the
yeah,
problem with being the follower. You're easy
yeah.
prey.
And
You're
so when it comes to practice, it's very easy to get caught up in the comfort of that and
Yep.
just going, it's no big deal. I get concerned about that for folks, and it gets frustrating at times because you see people that just don't listen to you and you
Yep.
worry for them. But
Yep.
on the flip side of that, on the good side, because we've talked about that bad side enough, creating your niche in practice is something that sets you apart from the rest of the crowd,
Yep.
whether it be,
I'm gonna park you right there
yep,
because we need to take a break. But there's a great segue here. So everybody, we're gonna take a quick break. Hear a word from our sponsors. We're gonna come back and we're talking about being an innovator or a follower and kind of the herd mentality that sometimes we see in the profession. And we're gonna have a debate over whether it's niche or niche. We'll be right back.
In today's economy, every dollar counts. Families are facing tough choices, having to reconsider what was once essential to them. When it comes to healthcare, no one should have to compromise on their well-being because of financial constraints. That's where Power Health USA steps in, the solution for your practice. We understand the financial pressures families are under, whether they're insured, on Medicare, or paying out of pocket for treatment. By offering discounts on care, you can ensure that your patients can still afford the treatment they need. At Power Health USA, we're committed to making sure no family has to sacrifice their health due to financial hardship. We'll work with you to create a game plan that keeps your waiting room full and your practice thriving. And here's the best part. Offering affordable care not only benefits your patients, but also positively impacts your bottom line. So why wait? Join Power Health USA today and join the ranks of the most successful practices. Because when you put your patients first, everyone wins.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the KC CHIROpulse Podcast. We are talking about being an innovator or being a follower in the chiropractic profession. And Troy, you opened the door to the importance of building a niche in your practice. I know I
yeah.
didn't go there, niche or niche.
From what I understand, the higher your IQ, the more you lean towards using the word niche instead of niche.
So if I call it niche, my IQ is like off the chart.
Oh, off the chart, way up there. That's like a French version of it.
Yeah. Put an
Yeah.
accent goo on it. See, I took French in school.
I love it.
Yeah, I think having a niche is incredibly important because here's the problem with finding yourself in that herd mentality is you're no different than anybody else having that same kind of practice. And so I think this is sometimes where our profession gets people confused a little bit. And you brought this up earlier. You had a patient that came in and said, the last doctor I went to billed for that service. Or the last doctor I went to did a 17-minute massage after the adjustment. How come you don't? And this is where our profession gets trapped in this we're all the same kind of idea because we're afraid to be innovators. And being an innovator is a good thing because it makes you stand out. And part of that is having a niche in your practice, whether it's dry needling or your adjustment skills or your therapies that you do in your practice, whatever it might be, maybe your pediatric practice, having a niche and marketing that niche is incredibly important.
And you may have to continue to be innovative because in a
It
lot of cases,
changes.
whatever you're doing 5 years from now, everybody's doing. And so
Exactly.
you may have to create a new niche, or you're just the top of the heap and you're the best at it and you were first to market with it
Yep.
and you're where you need to be. But sometimes you do get in that situation where it's time to reinvent yourself again. And I look at that all the time. I'm constantly evaluating my practice to determine, are there services we need to add? We look at it from a standpoint of not, and being innovative sometimes is not just the techniques that you use in your practice. I have had a phrase that I've used forever, and my staff knows it inside and out: sight, smells, and sounds.
Yep.
When you walk into my practice, I want the practice to look very professional, but
Yep.
also I want it to look homey. I want it to look like something that you want to walk into and it's comforting and reassuring. Smells, we use essential oils all over our office.
Yep.
I want it to smell good all the time. I don't want it to smell antiseptic, and I don't want there to be no smell. I want there to be some sort of
Yep.
aroma, because I have patients all the time to, "Oh my gosh, what is it you're doing in the diffuser today?" Because we change it
Used
all
to
the
get
time.
that too. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the sounds for me, they could be anything. You could play a soft rock station, something that is agreeable to everyone. You could play jazz music. You could play like a K-Love radio, positive and uplifting music. I vacillate between jazz and K-Love.
Mhm.
And the reason I do is, any of you that have used K-Love, they have a fundraising drive at different parts of the year, and it's more talk than it is
Yeah.
music.
So you have to switch.
Or I get to a point of where their top 40 songs that they play over and over again, because they're really a top 40 Christian station, gets to be where, like, I know the words to every single song. It's time to go back to jazz for a little while.
It's kind of
But
like the Christmas station at Christmas
yeah,
time. Yeah.
sight, smell, sound. So for me, I feel like I'm innovative when I do that, because I'll walk into other offices and it's not the case. Maybe there's no aroma. Maybe there's no music playing. There's no sound whatsoever. And maybe their staff is super cordial when you walk through the door, but to me, it's eerily silent because I like to hear music. And so basically, I want it to look like and smell and sound like what I would want to walk into in an office.
Yep.
And I get good patient feedback from that, but that's a very small thing, but that's still being innovative and removing yourself from the pack. My waiting room looks more like somebody's living room with a fireplace and a TV up above playing Cairo TV, rather than a bunch of waiting room chairs. I actually went to a consignment store,
Mhm.
bought somebody else's furniture out of their
Sure.
living room and put it in my waiting room, and people love it. They go in and lounge in my waiting room, get themselves a cup of coffee or hot cocoa,
Yep.
if I'm not ready for them. But some of them are like, "Darn, I was gonna get a cup of hot cocoa today, and you were ready for me too quick." So
Ours was like a bookstore. We had this huge bookcase just full of books,
yeah,
all kinds of books, books on health, books on raising a family, whatever. And we would let patients actually check books out, and they loved it. People would come in with a cup of coffee and sit down, and they'd stay there for an hour
yeah,
just to read on their book.
like a
So,
library. But that's a niche for you, because what other office can you think of that has a large bookshelf with a bunch of books
right.
where you can come in and just check things out? I'd be fascinated by that.
So are you out there? I'm just going to pose this question. Are you an imitator or an innovator? Are you looking like the same old chiropractic experience that anybody can get in your town? Or are you being an innovator in a way that is attracting people to a brand new experience? And I want to come back. We need to take another break. I want to come back and I want to talk about how being an innovator helps build that great patient experience.
And we're going to give you a really good quote from Ricky Bobby when we get back. If you don't know who Ricky Bobby is, watch Talladega Nights. We'll be back.
Pat's Chiropractic Consultants, your partner in chiropractic success. We are dedicated with one-on-one guidance to bring you all your practice management needs. Let's supercharge your practice. Give us a call today.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the KC CHIROpulse Podcast, brought to you by Cats Consultants and Chiro Health USA and Ricky Bobby, apparently.
Yeah.
So we're talking about this idea of, are you an innovator or an imitator? And being an imitator is just making your practice look like every practice in town. But being an innovator is what creates a different patient experience. I use this example ad nauseum, but Starbucks took an old, bland, traditional coffee shop and turned it into something that people want to be a part of. They want to go. They want to see how they going to spell my name today. Are they going to remember me when I walk in the door? That kind of thing. They created an energy around coffee. And so what kind of energy are you out there? Are you creating around chiropractic care? I'll give you another example. I don't know if you out there, you're familiar with this, but look them up. The Savannah Bananas. They're a minor league baseball team. They're basically a off-season college team, but they have totally turned a baseball game on its ear and done something totally different. And here's the cool thing about it. They are sold out every game, every season for years in advance because of how they've just changed people's idea of baseball. People talk about going to these baseball games. They don't even like baseball, but they go to see the show. So what is your practice? Are you putting on a show? Are you creating something innovative that creates a patient experience that people absolutely want to be a part of?
Yeah, that is really what you're looking at. And my quote from Ricky Bobby, I'm sure those of you that have seen Talladega Nights thought I was going to say, I'm on fire. I'm on fire as I rolled out. Perception is reality. So Ricky Bobby was right. He was on fire because he thought he was. But here's the quote. If you're not first, you're last. And quite frankly, if you're just riding in the middle of the pack and you're really not trying to be innovative, to me, it's a more dull experience for your patients when they're walking through the door. And most of you say to us, I don't want to do sales. Sales is such a dirty word, right? I don't want to do sales. One way to not do sales is to create an environment in your practice where people want to come back.
You know what the funny part of that is? That is part of sales.
Oh my gosh. We just
Notice how I
did say
whisper that?
that's one way to bring people into your practice.
Yeah.
Another way to not sell, but to be different from other practices could be in your delivery with patients when you talk about care. Here's a really great example. This is a guy that had come into my practice in and out several times, really never followed through with a whole lot, but the message remained the same. So the message was, you probably ought to be seen a little bit more often. It's good to see you, the conversation, and I ended it with that at the very end. Never said another word because he typically did not schedule. He would call me, which was, it's unusual in my practice. Most people schedule to try to get the slot they want.
Sure.
And
Why
so
wouldn't you?
I'll just call. So I walk out of my adjusting room. I happen to have a second to walk back to my office, which doesn't happen very often. But I was walking by the front and I heard him scheduling. And he even scheduled within the time frame that I thought he should have, but I never gave him a time frame. But he'd heard the message from me enough times
He knew.
that he knew. And that in itself separates me from other chiropractors in my area that maybe run more of what I would call a first aid practice or a pain relief practice. My goal with patients, and I tell them up front when I'm working with them, that my goal in practice is not only to get you well, to keep you well for the long term.
Yeah.
When you're 75 years old, I still want you trucking around doing what you want to do. It's a really simple way to explain why long-term care is important, because you're not going to fall over today. I know if I don't see you next week, and I told you that'd be a great idea to see you next week, you're probably not going to die. So it's important, but is it urgent? No. Now, sometimes it's urgent because you're in a great deal of pain, but sometimes it's not. So that's another way to set yourself apart, which is just a tiny little thing that sets yourself apart from other practices in the area. So you have to really evaluate, what are other people around me doing? What are we doing in our practice? If you have staff, get them involved. What are we doing that's cool? What are we doing that's not so cool?
Yep.
Where have we failed our patients? Your staff knows probably more than you do about that at times.
And this is a fun exercise with your staff. You guys out there, you ask us all the time, what are good things to talk about in a staff meeting? Talk about how can we create a better experience? How can we innovate some new ideas into the practice so we set ourselves apart from everybody else and stop being the imitator?
And let's do the free ones first, because the free ones are usually the easiest. They are also ones that aren't painful because you're not having to go out and buy stuff. I think a
Yeah.
lot of times we try to buy our way out of complacency in practice
Yeah.
because we know we're complacent or our practice is just plodding along and we're like, I want some excitement. I want it to be better.
You don't
You
have
could
to spend
do
a dime to do this.
no, you could do some crazy cool stuff in your practice. You patients involved. We do things that may seem very simple, but get a lot of patient involvement. We did a coloring contest. We had people coming in off the street to get involved in the coloring contest because there was a prize at the end of it. And we told them, feel free to tell your friends if they want to come in and do it, patient or no patient, they can come in. And I had young kids in my waiting room coloring pictures to be hung in the front of the office for us to give prizes away at
I
the end
love
of the
that.
month.
I love
And
that.
so that was an innovative thing.
Yeah.
And I could have kept it just to our patients and said, oh, you have to be a patient to do it. But I said, no, let's let the community be involved. Plus, it gave an opportunity for people to walk into my office because my office, the way it's set up, the sun shines in our office really badly in the afternoon. And so we've got the screens on the front that have our logo and our name and all that, but you can't really see into the office from the outside. You have to walk in. And so it allowed people in this smaller town that are used to seeing my logo and they know where my office is at, but they've never been inside the building to walk in and go. And I heard a lot of times, wow, this is really nice in here. And guess what? I didn't spend a whole lot of money doing it.
Yeah.
Like I said, consignment store. So that's part of the innovative process is figuring out how you can do things. But sometimes you're in a cash strapped situation because maybe your practice isn't doing as well as you want. And you're like, I don't have a bunch of money to spend on this. Start with the free stuff. Pull your
Yep.
staff, find out what should we do.
Absolutely. Get out there and be an innovator. Don't be afraid of that. So you tell your patients, I'm sure, to stay away from imitation foods that are bad for them. Quit making yourself imitation. Get out, innovate, create that experience for patients, do something unique, different, and fun, and your practice will soar because of it. All right. Great show today. Great topic.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And it's something you guys can go do today. And I love
Absolutely.
that. We do this often. So if you haven't listened to us before, this is the kind of stuff that we're giving you is something that you can implement in your practice this week.
Yeah.
Which is
Abs-
fantastic.
Absolutely. So if you haven't done so yet, go to catsconsultants.com. Check out all the great things we're doing to help doctors really create thriving, profitable practices. There's some free downloads and things on there. Feel free to check them out. Make sure you subscribe and share the podcast. I'm telling you guys, this is crazy. I was looking at the numbers earlier, and our podcast has grown like wildfire, but it's because of all of you out there listening to us. So we really appreciate it. We do this, Troy and I do this, and the rest of the team because we want chiropractors to succeed.